Welcome back to Embracing the Fight. This is the podcast where we talk about the battles that shape us, the moments that break us, stretch us, and humble us. And guess what? They ultimately build us. Today's episode is called Life Lesson. But before we get into that, if you haven't already, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, Embracing the Fight. You can also find me on Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, X, and Facebook, all as Embracing the Fight. Instagram is a little different, as it is Embracing the Fight _ Also, if you would like to be a guest on Embracing the Fight, and I would absolutely love to have you, just reach out to me on social media, or you can comment below or send me an email to operations@diversitydesigned.com. Now that I have the business of everything out of the way, let's jump into today's episode, Life's Lesson. So, because life is a teacher, sometimes gentle, you know, sometimes brutal, sometimes, unforgettable. And some lessons don't feel like lessons when they happen. They feel like, embarrassment, like heartbreak, like humiliation, like pain. All those things hurt. But later, you realize that those lessons are what saved you. So let me start off by sharing a lesson that has followed me for life. And it's a story from when I was in elementary school. A story, I actually hadn't thought about, in years until today, because I was actually speaking with my classmate, my high school classmate, Dr. Marcia Waller, concerning our 30th, high school class reunion that's happening this year. We were, reminiscing about elementary school. So let me tell you, the story. So I was in the 4th grade at Walter P. Jones Elementary School in Mrs. Lillie Mae Searcy's class. And we were doing, math. She had put all these different math problems on the board. So, I was smart. I knew I was smart because I got a lot of the questions right. And you know what? It felt good. And I loved answering, questions. I loved to be the first one, to raise my hand, the first one to speak, the first one, ultimately to be right. I wanted to be seen as a kid, who knew the answers because I didn't grow up in a neighborhood. I didn't have automatic friends, on the school bus. My parents brought me to school. I thought I needed something, to stand out about me, to draw people to me. And, what I came up with, everyone loves a winner, right? Everyone loves, the smart kid. So let's go back to the story. One day, we were doing math problems and raised my hand and I blurted out the answer. But the answer was loud and it was wrong. I didn't hesitate. I didn't check, my work. I didn't think it through. I just spoke. Next thing I know, Miss Searcy told me to come to her desk because I wasn't that far from her desk. I was like maybe a row over. So all I really had to do was stand up and like turn towards her. And on her desk, she always had this like drink mix and water, sitting there. It was something that she would have to like take spoons and put in, shake up and drink for her diabetes. So she looked at me and asked me to say the answer again. So, I'm thinking it's a trick question. So I repeated the same answer, loud and wrong. And then, you know what? I felt that wet spoon smack my hand. At that moment, I froze. I was in shock. My feelings were hurt. I thought I was right. And all the other kids in the room are looking at me in this moment. I'm looking around the room. I'm expecting to hear a giggle, something. Nobody laughed. Nobody said anything. All the other kids were silent. They were frozen too. They were just staring at me. So in that moment, I dropped my head. I walked back to my seat. I fought tears that were begging to fall. I didn't answer any more questions that she had for that entire class. So then when we were about to go out to lunch, or was it PE, she told me, to stay behind for a minute. She looked at my poor little sad, little broken face and said, Erica, you are usually right 95% of the time, but it's that 5% that can harm you. Before you're quick to answer, I need you to think and make sure you know what it is you're sharing, what it is that you're saying. Because that one time that you get it wrong might be the one time you never get back. And I don't want that feeling. I had to think of it. So I went home and I told my mom. My mom said, yes, Miss Searcy was right about the lesson and told me to take heed. She knew I wasn't harmed by Miss Searcy, but she could tell, that my feelings, they were, truly, truly hurt. And here's the part that sticks with me until this day. And here I am, 47, I'll be 48. No, I'm 48, 48 years old. I wish there were more people like Miss Searcy. People who never, set out to hurt you. But if my pride had to be damaged to save my life, I knew she would do it. And I'm grateful for that lesson. I'm grateful because imagine if she'd never said it. And I kept trudging forward. Just let that think in. Let it sink in. A fourth grade moment, a wet spoon, a bruised ego. Yet this lesson has lasted for decades. Life doesn't always teach in classroom, but when it does, sometimes those lessons follow you forever. They're constantly in the back of your mind. And guess what? You're not the only one who learned a lesson in the moment. The people who were watching, they learned as well. So think before you speak. There is power of pause. The moment that taught me something deeper than math, it taught me the power of pause. In life, being quick isn't always wise. Now, if you run track or something like that, then yeah, being quick is wise. But if you jump the gun, you'll be disqualified. Being loud isn't always being right. Being confident isn't always being correct. Sometimes wisdom is truly in the hesitation. And sometimes maturity is in the silence. And guess what? The power is in thinking before speaking. So Miss Searcy taught me that your reputation may be built or is built on that 95%. But guess what? It's destroyed in that 5%. One careless word, one impulsive decision, one emotional outburst, one moment you didn't think, that 5% could destroy everything that you ever built. Why? Because the world remembers that one moment. That lesson has followed me into adulthood, into leadership, into the entrepreneurial journeys that I've started, into relationships. Because once something leaves your mouth, you don't have the ability to get it back like cartoons, like how they can breathe it back in and the words, go back in. We don't have that ability. So that's why pride, humility, and necessary pain exist together. So let's think about it. Let's be honest. That moment humbled me because oh my stars, my pride was hurt. I was embarrassed. I didn't answer any questions for the rest of the day. It quieted for a while. But humility is a teacher that pride will never allow. So you think about it, life sometimes has to humble you so you can survive success. Imagine if you got everything and never had to answer for anything. Sometimes your pride needs to be bruised so your character can be built. If you've never been through a storm, how do you know how to handle it when it comes? Miss Searcy didn't just teach math. She taught discernment, restraint, responsibility. The older I get, the more I tend to realize that, some people love you enough to correct you. Others love you enough to let you self-destruct. They'll watch you in silence, just not to hurt your feelings. But at the same time, they know you're headed down the wrong path. Don't be that person. So life's lessons, you know, learned in childhood show up in adulthood. So life didn't stop teaching, after elementary school. The lessons just got more complex and baby, more expensive. Relations taught me about boundaries because I used to give freely and do things freely, and people showed me who they were, and I didn't get my money back, and I was hurt. Business taught me about patience because when my business didn't take off, I was ready to quit. I was like, no, I got to be patient. I got to see this through. Leadership taught me about accountability because I can't say something and then watch it fail and not say that I had my part in it. Loss taught me about time because when I put my time and effort into it, if it didn't happen, it was a loss. Success taught me about my identity because success isn't who I am, it's what I've done. But the foundation started with that spoon and that math problem. Think before you act. Think before you speak. Think before you respond emotionally. Because sometimes that one mistake, more than you imagine, can cost you everything. One mistake, that 5%. So what we need to do now is talk about the gratitude for the teachers who had to hurt the help. I think about Miss Searcy often. She wasn't the only teacher that did that. But I think about how today that moment, might be controversial, because in her mind, she was saving me. She didn't want me to walk into a world, where my intelligence, confidence, and voice could be undermined by one careless moment. See, you can't discipline kids in school. You can't straighten them out that way now. But then she cared enough to do what she needed to do to correct me. And I wish there were more mentors like that. People who love you enough, to check on you. People who risk being misunderstood to protect your future. Because she didn't bruise me. It didn't even hurt. It was just the sound of a spoon hitting your knuckle. Because not all pain is abuse. Some pain is discipline with purpose. And I know a lot of people aren't going to agree with that because they're, spare the rod, spoil the child. They don't agree with that anymore. And you can see in the world how everything is going because of the lack of discipline. So let me ask you this. What lesson is life teaching you right now? What are you learning? What moment embarrassed you, but then later on you revealed or you realized that it saved your life? What correction felt harsh, but prevented disaster? What pain was actually protection? Because you know what? Life doesn't always explain itself. It doesn't say, hey, I'm about to happen. Sometimes, it takes you decades to learn the lesson, later on. Months, weeks, hours, whatever. It takes time to learn these lessons. So, in that, know that you have gratitude and growth. And Miss Searcy has passed. She passed many, many years ago. But if she could hear this today, I would say, thank you. Thank you for caring enough to correct. Thank you for teaching me humility. Thank you for teaching me to think before speaking. Thank you for protecting my future, even if it hurt my feelings. Life's lessons aren't always gentle, but they are most certainly necessary. And if you're in a season where a lesson feels painful, hurtful, pause and ask yourself, how did I get here? Is this harming me or is this shaping me? What have I prayed and asked God to fix or correct in my life? Because sometimes that correction comes within. Because you know what? Sometimes the lesson that hurts the most is the very one that saves you the most. This has been Embracing the Fight. And this story has resonated with you. Please share it with someone who's learning right now, who's learning the hard way. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to watch this episode of Embracing the Fight. And as always, I want you to have an absolutely amazing day.